don't know how to put this up while it's live. There's no, doesn't give you an address to post. But it's recording, so that's good. Okay, so service gonna. I know I said I was gonna do. We had planned to do the end of Purim teaching, and then I still have to do part 2 for E. We're going to do that next week. Because this thing, I'm itching to do this teaching. I really want to do it. And it's already slowly starting to leak out there. So I want to get the jump on this because, you know, it's a little bit of it's in the newsletter for Torah Light. So now some people have already read that, even people up in Oroville. And I want to get the jump on this before all the good stuff gets leaked out. So that's what we're going to do. But we got some other things we're going to do first. We're going to do the ordination at the end of the service. Okay. I have it here somewhere. There it is. Yes. And we'll do songs at the end of the service and stuff as well because we're online. It's good to see everybody. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. What advantage then has the Jew? Or what profit is there?
Much in every way.
It's good to be a Jew.
Yes.
Yeshua said, do whatever the Pharisees tell you. So should we find out what the Pharisees say? Of course. Of course. Well, don't do it some of them. There was a few bad apples. That's who he's talking about here. He's not saying the whole Pharisaical party, just a few bad apples. Don't do as they do. Those few were, they're like rhinos. They were the rhinos of the Pharisaical party. Good. Let's blow the shofar. Okay. Good. Let's stand for the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Okay, we'll do Hatikva at the end. Let's do Chavarim Tovim. We can say hello to each other. Show them that you care. Chavarim Tovim.
How do you fix your phone?
That's short.
I don't have my phone with me.
Short. Yeah. Short. Oh, okay. I thought it might have noticed.
It's not so much.
Wilbur. This is for you from Joanne. She said you can throw the card away before you go home. So that's to you from Joanne. Okay.
Just don't look at it. You can have all of those things. Oh, you know what? I understand. I understand, absolutely. Thank you for your prayers for Kenny.
Yeah?
He texted me back that night and he got back. He said, I'm home.
Good.
It was 9:38. They went Yakima way.
Oh, okay,
instead of the
okay.
other way.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I'm glad.
He's home safe.
Yes.
That's the important thing.
That's always
Wow.
my concern.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
That's my
Yeah. No. Yeah. Any way to get a address there? What in the world? Hey, how are you? Shabbat Shalom. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot it was Purim the other night, or wore myself
Oh,
out
that's
cooking dinner.
beautiful.
I was ready to go to bed right after that.
Right.
CD says, no, there's a class. I got to go to class.
Okay, gotcha. That's all right. We understand.
Yeah, he showed up surprised.
Right.
Hey,
Yeah. Book of the Tov, Shabbat Shalom. I can't figure out how to put this silly thing. Drives me crazy. I want to say go see it here, but I guess just go to my channel. Hey, Joanne. Shabbat Shalom. How are you?
I'm good.
Here, it says live now, so I should be able to click on that, right? Oh, here it is. Got it. Let's put it on Facebook.
Shabbat Shalom. How are you doing? You like it, Nancy?
Right here. On live.
Shabbat Shalom. Where's your wife? Okay.
All right.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom. How you feeling?
Seems like I'm feeling fine.
Okay. Good. I'll take it. Sounds good. So got your nose, huh?
Yeah, when she's sleeping, I was playing with her before and she fell asleep. And I was going up to her and she grabbed me.
But she was startled.
Yeah, startled.
Never play got your nose with a Doberman.
No, I've done it before.
I think Confucius said that once.
She was a pup when I did it before. And I pushed that and helped growing that.
Right.
She was zoning. She was out. And I went up to kind of
it startled her.
trying to play with her. And she,
I do the same thing when somebody wakes me up.
you know, when I was in the service, I'll never get this guy. His name was Ron Shapiro. And the guy about this tall. And you had to prod him.
My dad was like that.
He'd just get like violent.
Yeah, my dad was like that because he went through Vietnam.
Yeah.
So my mom would have to wake him up with the end of the broomstick
That's what we did with this.
because he'd jump up swinging.
That's what we did with this guy. No matter
Wow.
what. Unless he got up on his own.
Right, that's different.
But when we got to go to PT or whatever.
Yeah.
He was a hard sleeper.
When I wake up, the worst thing I do is go get something to eat.
I just
I get up and get some breakfast. I go, where's my food?
yeah. I've never seen anything like it.
Wow.
And he just like you said, you did.
Yeah, he'd wake up swinging. And he went through the Korean War, Vietnam. I mean, he was
How long was he in for?
10, 15 years at least, maybe more.
I never knew that.
Yeah, he's a Navy guy.
Real military.
Yeah, like the Coast Guard. No.
Well, how old would your dad be if he's still alive?
Oh, 85.
Okay. My dad's 90. My dad was in the Korean.
Yeah,
He was a Navy guy.
yeah, maybe more now because I think he died at 85.
At 85?
Yeah, so that puts him. That was how long ago now? 3 years, 4 years, 3 years.
Bob's been gone 6 this year.
He'd be close to same
He went after Bob.
Yes. So it's probably been 4.5.
Pretty close to
So 4.5, pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in the Korean War, he worked on airplanes,
Oh,
the radios.
gotcha.
And I remember him telling me this one story about this crazy guy. I don't know if this was the Vietnam or Korean War, but he was on planes that looked for subs.
Okay.
And sometimes, the subs had to surface. And he said this pilot that he flew with was crazy. And he kept this next to it where he sat. He kept these pebbles, little rocks. And for fun, he'd fly down real close to those subs, open up his window, and throw a rock. And he'd go, ting! And everybody in the sub could hear that. And my dad was like, he was crazy. He was straight on. Ding!
I see.
Quite a story.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to fly with that guy. Okay, so we did that. And the service is going to be part's going to be teaching, then the other part's going to be, and I kind of misspoke. I said it was a documentary. It's really more of a lecture. I don't think that's a documentary, right? What's the difference? What's the difference? Okay. It's a lecture. Really good one. All right, here we go. So for prayers, strength and finances for Les and Joanne. Satochi for Jenna's mom for healing and comfort.
She's doing much better, thank you.
Okay, I'll take that off. This could be an old list too, but pray for our government, for Nancy's brother. He's not in the government. That's two separate prayers. For Logan for healing and safety, for Karen for healing, for Christina to stay off. Are they here? Oh, look at there. How about that? Shabbat shalom. For Colton and Cindy and Christina. Countries to open up the restriction due to COVID. Anita and her family in Alaska. For Judah for safety. For Peggy's son for direction and safety in his job. Is that right? For Linda for healing and reconciliation with her son. For Laura for healing. For Henry for healing. Any other prayer requests today? Laura.
They've had 3 volcanic eruptions recently.
Who?
Guatemala.
Okay. We pray for the victims in Guatemala. So you guys remember we were talking the other day about the oil spill in Israel, and I hadn't seen any coverage of it. So I went back that night. I'm looking all through Israeli news. Nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. So then I went to American news, and it was everywhere.
Oh my God.
I was like, what's up with that? What? Did the Israelis not feel it was that? Yeah. Because the fishermen are already out fishing in this stuff.
Are they trying to hide something?
Yeah. Trying to what?
Hide something?
I don't know. I don't know. But the fishermen are out there. They said the fish, because, the environmentalists would have you believe that when these oil spills happen, that it kills all the fish. And the fishermen say, no, they just go down. It says the oil stays up on the top.
Right.
So they drop their things down here and pull them up, and they still fishing. It does kill some things. It kills like sea turtles,
Birds and stuff.
some birds, but it's not as bad as the environmentalists would have you believe. We're going to find out. The media, even in this teaching today, you can't trust anything. You can't trust anything they tell you.
That's right.
Okay, Guatemala. I can't see. Joanne,
Yeah, I'd like a prayer for my daughter Holly. Tomorrow is
what's her name?
my daughter Holly.
Holly?
Yeah. Tomorrow the 28th is her youngest son's was his birthday, but he was 17 and he OD'd.
Oh,
So she's gonna be,
for comfort.
yeah.
Okay. That's sad. Okay, why is this not moving down? Okay, we'll do that. We'll pray for
You have Cody's family on there?
Cody. Pray for Cody's family.
It's on the last sheet. I think it's on all this.
Yeah. For comfort.
For his
Ah,
sister
some-
Nicole.
and-
Yeah.
Huh?
His sister Nicole.
Right, for Nicole. Yeah, and for Nicole, we'll say. Okay, I got to make another one. Hang on. Paste. Okay. Wilbur.
Yeah, my sister-in-law, Blinish, is from Ethiopia,
Right.
and she's Tigray, which is
Right.
an ethnic group there.
Yep.
And they're having some kind of a civil war there.
It's going on again. It's like it's still go.
It was, I guess it started in November,
Okay.
and I guess they're still fearing for their lives.
Wow. I did see something again on the news about that today. I did see something about that.
We texted her this morning.
So the Tigray are the Christians. Am I right?
Yeah,
So let's pray for all of them. Let's pray for the whole group because they're fighting against the Muslims. Am I right?
well, they're fighting against the North, which they
It's-
are Christian where they were.
Right.
where they
But I understood it was the Muslims coming against them.
Yeah, that would be the majority.
The majority. Okay, so let's pray for the whole
It
group.
would be the Christians on the north, which would be the majority Christians on the north.
Am I? So is that true that they're fighting against the Muslims?
They're fighting against the federal government, which as I understand, they are
Sharia.
probably Muslims. Or,
Okay. Okay. Pray for the Christians of Ethiopia. And how is she related to you? Sister-in-law, you said? Or?
Sister-in-law.
Okay, Christians of Ethiopia. And for Wilbur's sister-in-law. Those rotten Muslims. They're just rotten. What a group of people. Okay. Jenna.
Some of you might remember Selena. She
Yeah.
was, she stayed with us a couple years ago.
Yeah.
She had tonsillitis so bad that it's actually, she has like a hole in her throat now.
Uh-oh.
So healing for her, and then when she recovers, she's gonna need to find an apartment here in Wenatchee.
Okay.
And I know apartments are hard to find.
They are.
She's gonna
Yeah.
have to find something cheap.
Gotcha. Selena, Selena.
Salena.
Okay.
Sally.
Pray for Selena for healing and a place to live. Got it. Anybody else? Joanne.
My brother's back in the hospital again.
Pray for Joanne's brother for healing.
And I've been having a pain in my back.
Okay.
It's not there all the time, but it's, when I'm sleeping, by the time morning comes, it hurts and it's like one. I don't know what's going on. It's been there every day now for about a month, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Here we go. Pray for healing. For Dawn.
Yeah, Dawn's
Okay.
family.
Pray for Dawn's family for more opportunities to receive salvation. Good. Joanne,
One other thing is this HR 5, we don't want it to pass.
what is it?
It's,
It's all the transgender stuff. It's, I mean, even, with the.
so that,
It's gonna be really, really bad. It's gonna affect adoption agencies, it's gonna affect everything.
What is it called? HR?
5.
HR 5, it just passed the Congress, it's gonna go to the Senate.
It's
Yeah,
the
HR.
Yes.
stimulus.
The legislature passed and it's going to the Senate. We just really
I don't
need
even
to
know what
pray
to
that
say about that.
none of those bad, I mean, because there's some really creepy laws coming down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're gonna pass. If I had a gun to my head, I'd tell you they're gonna pass. Things are gonna get worse, not better.
But we can pray that they don't.
We can pray that they don't, but at the same time, expect that they probably will. I mean, that's just the truth of it. That's reality.
You know.
So,
We should pray that we stand strong during these times.
yeah.
And protected.
Oh, that reminds me. I want to read a letter to you guys. I'll do it in a second. These difficult times. All right. So before we pray, I just wanted to read this real quick. I got an email from the accountant. I guess she's the head of the ads department at Wenatchee World. Let's see where to go. There it is. So I wrote her and I said, where is it? Where's the whole thing? So she wanted to put us into, she was trying to run my card and my card was declined because they'd lowered the limits, which I got to deal with that Monday. I don't know why they did that. Everything's fine on my card. But the thing was over. So she tried to run the card for the next ads. Thankfully didn't go through because I want to cancel the ads. But it didn't go through. So she writes, she said, I wanted to let you know I'm trying to renew your ad for Beta Venu and the card is declined. I'm guessing you have a new one that I need to put in this one's place. Give me a call. So I write back and I say, hi, Barbara, because I've known her for quite some time now. I said, hi, Barbara, good to hear from you. We're going to stop our ads for a while. We've noticed anti-Semitic attacks are on the rise across America. So we're basically going underground, so to speak, at least until we feel things get better. Thank you so much for your help over the years. And if there's an outstanding balance, please let me know, Rabbi Stanley. She writes this back. I couldn't believe it. She goes, Rabbi, your email broke my heart.
Wow.
She said, anti-Semitism has been around for centuries like a bad habit that we can't give up. And a strong, proud melting pot that I was raised to believe America is, this should be a non-issue. Let me tell you how sorry I am that there are idiots who think that being a bully is the way to be heard. My first thought is to fight them, but I recognize you have to protect your people. I'm disappointed on the business side too, because we're putting together a church directory, and I was so excited to have you be the first one there. I was going to ask if I could have your ad be one of the examples in the flyer. You have no balance due here. Let me know if you change your mind. In the meantime, I'll be praying for the safety of your congregation.
Wow.
Wasn't that something? That was really something. I was just like, wow. I couldn't believe it.
There's another one out
Yeah, I didn't even know she was a believer. She sounds like she's a believer.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the prayers. There we go. Okay, Wilbur. Would
So
you let?
didn't invite her to shul, huh?
Oh, then the next one I did. You want to hear the next what I wrote back to her?
Yeah.
Okay. I said, thank you. Sorry, Wilbur. Thank you so much for thinking of us. And it would have been an honor to be in your flyer. Unfortunately, we have to do what we have to do. We all voted on it and it was unanimous. We took down all the Israeli flags that we used to have hanging in the windows. There have been attacks even here in Wenatchee. So we decided to not be a target. There's a time to stand and a time to be still. These appear to be times to be still for us. We're not alone. Synagogues all over the country are rethinking how much they're going to be out there. The Inquisition lasted 800 years. It was a terrible time for Jews. Tens of thousands of us were murdered, but we learned a lot. We're using many of the same tactics our forefathers used then and also through the Holocaust. I lost a huge part of my family to Hitler's genocide, and we don't want to lose anyone else. We hope and pray that things will change and everything will go back to normal. If you ever want to visit us and see what the Jews are doing, let me know, and we'll unlock the door for you. Shalom in him, Rabbi. So she's welcome. She's welcome. You know, she just has to call me ahead of time, and if you know them, we'll let them in. We'll unlock the door. Otherwise, they can stay out. Good. All right. Wilbur. Oh, before we do that. No, sorry. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right. Is it up there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you were kidding.
Huh?
You were kidding.
No, we're ready. We can do it. Yeah. I was kidding. Oh, yeah. I was just kidding about that.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. We pray for unsaved loved ones, for healing. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Yes.
Pray for salvation for the Jewish people.
Yes.
Pray for strength and finances for Les and Joanne.
Yes.
Pray for Satoshi for his healing.
Yes.
Pray for our government. Pray that other countries will not continue to pass anti-Semitic laws.
Yes.
Pray for Nancy's brother.
Yes, Lord.
Pray for all our congregations to be safe around the world.
Yes.
Pray for today's message. Pray that the UN will be dismantled. Thank you for tithes and offerings.
Mm-hmm.
Pray for Logan for healing and safety. Pray for Karen for healing.
Yes, Lord.
For Christina to stay off drugs.
Yep.
Pray for safety for Colton. Pray for Cindy. Pray that the HR5 does not pass.
Yes.
Pray that we can stand strong through these difficult times.
Yes.
Pray for Joanne's back for healing.
Mm.
Pray for Don's family for more opportunities to receive salvation.
Mm.
Pray that countries open up their restrictions on the COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Pray for Rabbi Teresa and Jacob.
Mm.
Pray for Joanne's brother for healing. Pray for Christians of Ethiopia, for Blinish and her relatives.
Yes, Lord.
Pray for Selena for healing and a place to live. Pray for Anita and her family. Pray for Judah for safety. Pray for the victims in Guatemala.
Yes.
Pray for Holly for comfort. Pray for Cody's family for comfort and for Nicole. Pray for Peggy's son for direction and safety in his job. Pray for Linda for healing and for reconciliation with her son.
Yes.
Pray for Laura for healing. Pray for Henry for healing. Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Okay. We'll do the tithes and offering. Okay, that means take this one down. The Word document.
You got a little piece of paper and that Peter write his phone number down. I don't have to tell you. His phone number, Peter's phone number.
That's good.
Peter, would you find this?
Okay. We got to give this address. That's not the one. What happened? Here it is. Copy. And then on Facebook.
No, it's 253.
Uh,
225-6975.
Please hang up and dial again. All right. Weeks video. Okay, so there's not going to be any pictures until the video, but I'm going to do this little introduction now. I know some of you may not like this. Some of you may not like this teaching at all. Some of you are going to love it. So if you're one of those that don't like it, all I ask is that you think it over. Okay? I've been looking into this thing for months and months now, and I'm telling you it's the truth. It's the truth. And so I wrote a little introduction to kind of ease you into this a little bit. It's still going to be pretty rocky road, but hopefully you guys are going to be, everybody will be okay. So we're going to be talking about the Jewish gangsters, okay? The Jewish gangs were born out of the Prohibition. Some just say Prohibition, some say the Prohibition, whichever. The rabbis at that time, and I want to make sure we understand there are two different categories here. You had the early gangsters, and then you had the later gangsters. So most of the early gangsters, you guys wouldn't have even heard their names. It's usually the later gangsters that got your attention. So like Benny Siegel, they used to call it, they had the nickname Bugsy.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't call him Bugsy to his face. He would have wiped you out. He didn't like that name. But he was Jewish. Benny Siegel was a Jew. Meyer Lansky, you've probably heard that name. He was one of the top gangsters in the mob. In the mob. But the earlier ones were quite different. Even some of those later ones, a lot of what we have heard from the media, it isn't true. It isn't true. And today we're going to be doing this here in this lecture from one of those Jewish gangsters. He's an Orthodox Jew. So he tells the story of what it was really like back then, not what you heard in the papers. So the Jewish gangs were born out of the Prohibition. The rabbis at that time did not have an issue with breaking Prohibition laws because consuming alcohol is a commandment. It's a commandment. At particular times, like at Passover, we drink, not everybody, but a lot of us will drink wine. Okay? If you had a medical issue or you were allergic to it, you were exempt. You didn't have to drink. But I can show you commands in the Bible, in the Torah, where it says to drink. And not kids. Not kids. Well, I did when I was a kid. I remember my dad gave me a glass of wine at Passover. I remember that. I had coffee when I was a kid. They said you weren't supposed to do that, but so if you had a medical issue, you were exempt, of course. So the rabbis saw this as God's laws trumping man's laws. Okay? One may say that the gangs did much more than just make and sell alcohol. There were beatings and even murders. To answer that, we first have to understand a few things. One, because it was an underground business, the Jews couldn't go to the law for any help. They were on their own. Selling alcohol at that time was not an easy venture. the Jews were competing against other gangsters with a lot less morals. Those people had a lot less morals. 2, according to Albert Frieden, I got his book, I was going to bring it out here. In his authoritative book, The Rise and the Fall of the Jewish Gangster in America, on pages 102 and 103, he says that the Jewish, and he's not the only one who said this, I've researched this, I've backed this up. He says that the Jewish community as a whole didn't drink much. So the market, the Jewish market, was not enough to keep the bootleggers employed. So the Jewish gangs were then forced to sell to what he called the Gentile market. Because the non-Jewish gangs were so violent, if you were going to be a part of that business, you had to stand up to those thugs. This caused the evolution of Jewish gangs to become more and more violent themselves. Especially the early Jewish bootleggers, they didn't see themselves as murderers. They were simply just trying to keep their businesses. These guys have been doing this from generation to generation. And then all of a sudden the government, I'll just say this. All of a sudden the government came in and said, no, it's illegal. Do you know why that happened in the first place? How the prohibition came about in the first place?
They weren't getting any taxes or anything.
That and the non-Jews were drinking so much alcohol, it was becoming a social issue. No offense, but especially when the Irish came. I got a little bit of Irish in me, but it's true. When the Irish came, I mean, it started skyrocketing, right? But it wasn't just the Irish, it was all the non-Jews, the Italians as well. So that is right around the time when the revival started happening in America, the Great Revival. So all the preachers of the Great Revival saw a problem with all their, non-Jewish people drinking too much, and so they decried it as a trespass. In their words, a sin. So what happened is they went from one side of the pendulum, where all these people were drinking, and they said nobody should even have a drink. They went clear to the other side. And the revivals were huge back then. And one of their main things is they were telling people no alcohol whatsoever. And that kind of passed on to the government. Well, how do you think the Jews felt about that? They're sitting back saying, all you drunkards, you're the one that caused this problem in the first place. And then the Christians have this knee-jerk reaction to it, and now I'm supposed to lose my business because of it? So they went to their rabbis. They said, what are we going to do? And the rabbi said, keep selling it. That's not our fault what these lunatics are doing. You keep your business. You provide for your family. This has been for generation after generation. The rabbis were behind it. And you're going to hear testimony to that today as well. Okay. So they didn't see themselves as murderers. If you allowed the non-Jews to come and bully you, you'd be out of business in a week. So they felt they had to stand their ground. And they did have a moral code. You're going to hear about that a little bit more today, too. The early gangsters wouldn't hurt women or children. They only went after those who tried to intimidate them or tried to steal their business or were going to kill them. They'll tell you they only went after people who had it coming to them. And they wouldn't have anything to do with drugs or prostitution. And they would even punish those if one of their own in their ranks even started to mess with it. And prostitution wasn't even an issue in the beginning anyhow, because there weren't no Jewish girls that were involved in it. I'm not saying 100%, I'm saying the vast, vast majority. The Jewish girls were from good homes. One of the early Jewish gangsters, not the one we're going to hear from today, His name was Irving Wexley. Anybody recognize that name? He was married to his rabbi's daughter. Her name was Leah. Wexley was a Polish Jew, and I love the Polish Jews. They went through very difficult times back then. So because they were selling predominantly to non-Jewish customers, they had to beef up their image a bit. The man I just told you about, who married the rabbi's daughter, Irving Wexler, he couldn't be taken seriously with a name like Irving, right? So he adopted a nickname. So Irving became known as the notorious Waxy Gordon, one of the most famous early gangsters of all time. Waxy was born clear back in 1888. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. There's a difference between these early guys and the later guys. But even the later guys, like I say, aren't as bad as you might think. That's 1888 is when he was born. He lived into his 60s, and he died of a heart attack in the early 1950s. His story is a sad story. He started off with the same moral code as the other Jewish gangsters. But he was then betrayed by two new up-and-comers. These two young men were named Meyer Lansky, who was a fellow Jew, and an Italian criminal who they called Lucky Luciano. These two worked with the Attorney General by supplying him with tax information that led to Waxy's arrest, for which Waxy was sentenced to 10 years, doing most of his time in Fort Leavenworth in the penitentiary in Kansas. We have to realize that Waxy's major business was beer. That's what he sold. He did sell a little bit of whiskey later on, but mostly his business was beer. The Jews of that time thought the prohibition laws were absurd. It had been brought about due to the overconsumption by the non-Jews and the Christians' overreaction to it. They had little respect for the drunken, what they called Gentiles, and thought the overcorrection of the Christians was a knee-jerk reaction to a problem among their own. Jews didn't have these kinds of problems. They were respectable. Most of them were doctors and lawyers and bankers at that time, not now. Bankers. Those Jewish lawyers had scruples back then. They were very intelligent. The bankers were fair and generous. It's the non-Jews who tried to make them look like crooks and thieves because they were jealous and afraid of the power the Jews had. The non-Jews also saw how Jews took care of their own and how the Jews would bend over backwards to help another fellow Jew. Well, that's what Jews are supposed to do, right? But you can imagine how a non-Jew would cry out and say, they aren't being fair. He gave him a loan, but he won't give me a loan. Well, yeah, he was going the extra mile for a fellow Jew. They were being fair, but they go extra far to help their fellow Jews. Think of Utah and how Mormons go extra far to help other Mormons. I don't blame them. I don't blame them. You should help your own. The other races helped each other too. The Irish helped the Irish. The Italians helped the Italians. Tell me the mafia didn't help their own? But the Jew couldn't help the Jew? But not all Jews could be doctors and lawyers and bankers. Alcohol at that time was the fifth largest, you can look this up, I looked it up. It was the fifth largest business in America at that time. Fifth largest. You know what the fifth largest business is in America today? No. Close. Pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals. Can you imagine telling your son, oh, I'm sorry, you can't go into the pharmaceuticals. you can't go into that business because these idiots over here don't know what they're doing. So that's going to ruin your whole career and your whole future. Sorry about that. That's what it would be like. So I hope you're starting to see there's a little bit more to this story than what we thought. And there was a whole lot of anti-Semitism back then. Now, the speaker you're going to hear, he's going to talk about I will stop it a few times throughout this thing, because there's things I need to point out so you have a balanced view. But he talks about this one time, and he says, at this particular time, anti-Semitism went crazy. Well, he's not saying that there was no anti-Semitism, and all of a sudden there was anti-Semitism. He's saying there was anti-Semitism, and then it got way worse. So I'll stop at those times. There was a lot of anti-Semitism then. So the press started making the Jews look bad. And so then the government also started to follow suit with that. Okay. Everybody okay? I'm getting some weird looks. So that's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
Les would like this teaching.
Yeah, some people are going to love this teaching. Some people are going to be like, I don't know. Stop. And I'm not saying that these guys were all saints. Don't get me wrong on that either. Even this guy that's going to be talking, from what I'm seeing in my studies, is that some of these gangsters were remember, these are the guys that weren't the doctors, weren't the lawyers, or the bankers. They're your lower level workers. You see what I'm saying? They didn't have to do a lot of college and all this sort of thing. So they're lower level workers. I'm not saying that that's with everybody's like that, but sometimes that means that some of these guys were a little bit more crass than some of the others. This guy's one of the more crass people. Matter of fact, I got to give you a warning. He does say the S word once, S-H-I-T. He does say that one time. It's not a bad word to him. It means garbage. It means like that. A lot of people, that word doesn't mean to what it means to some other people. So, okay, we're going to start listening. And so he's lower level. This is the last Jewish gangster alive. He even has a book called The Last Jewish Gangster in America. All right, I got to turn it down a little bit. He's giving this talk at a Chabad center. There's rabbis there. There's rabbis' wives are present. You'll see that part at the end. But it's quite interesting. And his son went through yeshiva, the gangster. All right.
So let's get down to business as quickly as possible. Let me tell you the story. I'm here to tell the story about the tremendous contributions that were made by the Jewish mob during for the betterment of the welfare of the Jewish people during from the 20th century going forward.
Can you turn it up?
Specifically, their participation in fighting the American Nazi Party in the 1930s, and the remarkable contribution that they made to help both Haganah and Irgun in the struggle for independence from the British and for the establishment of the State of Israel. So let's, I want you to think, keep this thought in mind as I tell the story. You're going to have a problem, because I have a problem sometimes figuring out who are the patriots and who are the pirates. If you take an Israeli patriot that was born or raised in Palestine, and he in turn was brought to the United States, and he was born and raised here, or was raised here in the United States, he may very well have turned out to have become a Jewish gangster. By the same token, take a gangster and have him raised in Palestine, he might very well have been a Jewish patriot. So
that's an incredible statement right there. An incredible statement. Now, when he said pirate, he's not talking about the Jewish pirates. He's not talking about that. He's saying the bad guys and the good guys. So he's saying if you would have just taken your average gangster here in America and put him over there, he'd be looked at as a freedom fighter for Israel. Yeah. And you bring that guy over here, and all of a sudden now from the IDF, he'd be called a gangster. Yeah. It's very interesting.
So I want you to keep that thought in mind as I tell my story. So let's begin with the formation of the Jewish mob. Where do we begin? So we begin in the ghettos of every major city of the United States. Now, I come from Newark, New Jersey. My father, Allah B'Shalom, was born in Newark, New Jersey. My father was part of that world, and I'm the last one to tell the story. So, and I'm proud to be able to tell this story because I have a responsibility to share an important part of history with Jews throughout the entire world, for that matter. So, it begins with gangs. It begins in the neighborhoods and the ghettos. These kids were tough kids, and there was poverty, and there was struggle for money, a struggle to survive, to take care of your parents. It wasn't parents taking care of kids, it was kids taking care of parents, their immigrant parents, and so forth and so forth. In the ghettos, and particularly I can tell you the story in the 3rd Ward of Newark, New Jersey, which was Prince Street Ghetto. So what would happen is when the pushcart guys were being attacked by the Shkutzim, by the Goyim, by the Anti-Semitism, they'd come in and they'd start beating up on the old Jews. So the old Jews would call the local gangsters. All of the kids, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, come, defend us, because you're defending your father, you're defending your uncles, you're defending your brothers, your cousins, and so forth and so forth. We're getting beat up. Well, this is not going to happen. In that generation, the Jews are not going to take it with beating on the head and bowing their head. And just like what happened in 1903 in Kishinev, in Europe at that time with the pogroms and so forth, we had a Jabotinsky that went and said, no. You're not going to do this to us anymore. We're going to have defense.
Okay, Jabotinsky is he does talk a little bit about it. He was a famous Zionist. I remember we went on the tour with Peter. The guide said we went past a street called Jabotinsky Street. He said, how many of you guys know who Jabotinsky was? Nobody, none of the Messianics on that bus knew. So I raised my hand because I used to live on that street. So I knew who he was. And he was a famous Zionist who really helped shape the thinking about how to develop the state of Israel. Now, he's going to use a lot of Yiddish words in here, too. Some of them I know, some of them I don't. But he uses a lot of Yiddish in this.
The 20th century, the turn of the 20th century becomes pivotal in terms of that we're no longer be submitting and bowing our heads. We're going to fight back. So these kids fought back. They fought back to protect the Jewish neighborhood. 1920. Well, we all know that 1920 was the passing of the Volstead, the Prohibition, and this was a tremendous opportunity for immigrants. Jews, Italians, Irish, Polish, everybody could benefit from making money where all the opportunities, the doors were closed for all other kinds of possibilities. A lot of our people went into Prohibition. So from those young gangs that were protecting the neighborhoods in the 1910, 1915, so forth, they now evolved into young 20-year-old businessmen of sorts, illegal, of course. Now, in Newark, New Jersey, we had a gentleman there, Sam Reinfeldt. Sam Reinfeldt was the first bootlegger of Newark, New Jersey. And Sam Reinfeldt, of course, Newark was divided between big Italian neighborhood, big Jewish neighborhood. The Italians had their own bosses. His name was Richie the Boot Boy Ardo. And our boss in Jersey was the name Abner Longies Willman. Why the name Longy is because when the Shkutzim would come in and beat up on Jews, the pushcart peddlers would say "Rift for the Langer." So from Langer comes the name Yiddish Longy. He was 6'1", 6'2", handsome, debonair, self-educated. At 20 years of age, he was already a boss. What happens, of course, is in the case of Reinfeldt employed him, Longy, and his partner. His partner's name was Joseph Doc Stacher, who later on was exiled to Israel in 1964, 63, 64. He was exiled by Kennedy. Kennedy at that time was the U.S. Attorney General, who worked out a deal but Longy's Wilman and Doc Stacher were the bosses of Jersey, and they ran alcohol. As a matter of fact, Sam Reinfeldt employed him, but ultimately Sam Reinfeldt had to accept them as partners, and ultimately, eventually, because Longy and Doc had the shooters, they had the gunmen, they had their own Jewish gangsters, so they eventually took over all of alcohol to the point where Abner Longy's Wilma became known as the Al Capone of New Jersey. It was Longy was a powerful man. Of course, it developed a little bit older, more self-educated and so forth. He financed movies, had a love affair with Jean Harlow, and he financed the Warner Brothers movies and so forth. They became prominent, and he was on the same level with Meyer Lansky. But let me continue with the story as far as Newark, New Jersey was concerned. Well, I will interrupt at this point to say that there was a Meyer Lansky met up with Longy's Wilman, and eventually they became very, very close friends. They worked together. They were both of the same world. There was one Jew, Arnold Rothstein. Arnold Rothstein was from a middle-class Jewish family, upper middle class, had money, but he wanted to be an outlaw. And he was more sophisticated. He gave training and teaching and education and sophistication to Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, and so forth and so forth. Continuing. With the end of the Prohibition ended in 1933, but we had a new phenomenon in the United States after the Roaring '20s. It was known as the end of Prohibition, the beginning of anti-Semitism. And if some of the older people here might remember Father Coughlin from Detroit, the anti-Semitism, and Henry Ford, the anti-Semitism. It was a terrible time in the United States as far as Jews were concerned. You had the rise of Nazi philosophy and policy, political movement in Munich. Now, in 1930, in the 1920s, the history begs a question that, well, I'm not ready to ask that question. Let me just say this, that in the 1930s, in Newark, New Jersey, New York, Minneapolis, Chicago, other places, Boston, you had this rise of terrible anti-Semitism. And with Hitler in Munich, we also had a Nazi comes to the United States by the name of Fritz Kuhn. Now, Fritz Kuhn was the leader of the brown shirt movement of the American Nazi Party in the United States.
That's right.
There was a prize fighter in Newark, New Jersey by the name of Nat Arno, a former prize fighter by the name of, his original name was Abramowitz. So he went to Longy's Wilman because Newark, New Jersey, we had a large German population going all the way back to the middle of the 19th century. And we had a large immigration of Germans after World War I. We had on Springfield Avenue in Newark, many beer gardens extending into Irvington, Union, Springfield, and so forth. Fritz Kuhn started in New Jersey to bring about to generate anti-Semitism and to spread Nazi philosophy in Newark. Nat Arno went to Longy, and Longy said, "Okay, I'm going to bless you. You go ahead and do what's got to be done." And they formed an organization that was called The Minutemen. It's a book written by a dear friend of mine, Warren Grover, called The Nazis of Newark. And it tells the story of the Jews that were called themselves the Minutemen that fought the American Nazi Party in the streets of northern New Jersey. And a lot of those participants in that were, of course, Jewish gangsters, thugs, prize fighters, and just regular workers. So they called themselves the Minutemen in honor of taking the name from the Minutemen that fought in the Revolutionary War, and that you call a club, call a bar, call a saloon, the Nazis are meeting such and such, we're meeting tonight, bring your monkey wrenches, bring your brass knuckles, and we're going to do damage. You bring your stink bombs and so forth. So when the Nazis would meet, the Jews would run in, throw in their stink bombs, throw this, throw that. And as the Nazis came running out, they took the worst beating of their life. This happened time and time again. It's all documented in a wonderful book called The Nazis of Newark, written by Warren Grover. There were many prize fighters. We had many champions. A lot of our Jewish boys that came out of the ghettos went into professional boxing, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands. And at one point, we dominated 1/3 of the professional prize fights of the United States, championships of the United States of America.
A third. I didn't know that. A third of the prize fighters were Jewish.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Now, in conjunction with the question of, in connection with this, I want to tell a real short, funny story. My father, Alav Shalom, had a very dear friend. His name was Jaime Kugel. Jaime was a referee at Laurel Gardens in Newark, New Jersey, and he was completely, he couldn't be objective. When a Jew was fighting, the Jew got the benefit of the doubt. So one night, and a lot of the fighters in those days would take on other names so that their mothers and fathers wouldn't know that they're fighting. And one night, there's a guy fighting by the name of Greenberg. Jerry, Greenberg gets knocked down. And Jaime Kugel goes, 1, 2, and by 3 he says, schmuck, I'm counting slow so you can get up, you dumb Jew, get up. Looks up at him, he says, I'm not Jewish, I'm Italian. 8, 9, 10, you're out. Well, Jaime Kugel was a member of the Minutemen also. You had these kind of, this was the type of Jew that we all knew and we love, because they love Jews, and that's what it's all about. So we fought the American Nazi Party in the 30s, and we finally defeated them to the point that they ran away. They did have a big meeting at Madison Square Garden. There's a very famous picture. 20,000 of them showed up in uniforms. Some Jew ran up by the name of Greenbaum, they beat him up. He ran up to the stage to attack Fritz Kuhn. Fritz Kuhn ultimately, who was the leader of the American Nazi Party, got indicted by the American government for embezzlement of his own organization. He got jail time and they deported him. So again, I'm telling a story that was a very important story, but this didn't only happen in Newark, New Jersey. There was a judge by the name of Judge Nathan Perlman, and a very famous Reform judge, a rabbi by the name of Stephen Wise, and they went to they reached out for Meyer Lansky and said, Mr. Lansky, we have a problem. In Yorkville, which was a German enclave in Manhattan, you got these anti-Semites, you got these brown shirts and so forth and so forth. You got to do something about it, all right? But one favor, please. You can beat the shit out of them, but don't kill anybody. So Meyer Lansky formed an organization comparable to the Minutemen. They went up to Yorkville, and they did effectively the job of throwing him out the window and beating him up and blooding him and so forth, to the extent that the Nazis understood that the Jews were not going to be cakewalk. You're going to walk over them, you're going to abuse them, and so forth and so forth. I want to tell a nice story because I met a nice gentleman over here. Tony, right? Is your first name Tony or what? Huh? Your name's Tony. So I'm going to tell a nice story. You're Italian. So be proud of the fact that you're Italian. I'm going to tell good stories about the Italians. We like the Italians. According to Rashi, our great interpreter of the Torah, you people are descendants of us. All right?
It's not true.
and I like pasta vazul. So now, Meyer Lansky, Charlie Lucky Luciano, he goes to Meyer Lansky and he says to Meyer, Meyer, let me give you some support with regards to beating up those Nazis in Yorkville. And Meyer Lansky says, Charlie Lucky, thank you very, very much for this very kind offer. This is a Jewish problem. Jews will take care of it by themselves. Now I want to tell you a little bit how the mobs, how they amalgamate. Okay, how the formation of the mob. So I told you the story of Prohibition and so on and so forth. Oh, before I forget, I want to tell you the story about Minneapolis. We had a mobster up there by the name of Dave Berman, very famous, went to the Vegas casinos. There was a mobster up there by the name of Pelly, William Pelly. He formed an organization called the Silver Shirts. It was an anti-Semitic organization, talked the worst crap on the face of the earth as far as Jews are concerned. And Dave Berman went into every one of their lodges every time they met with his crew. You had Yiddy Bloom, you had King Khan, you had Sam Turan, Herman Pastor, and they went in there and they kicked the crap out of these people so that Pelly found it uncomfortable to have these lodge meetings and talk anti-Semitism. Good. You had it also in Chicago. There was a very famous prize fighter. Can I see hand recognition right now? Somebody want to tell me that they know Barney Ross? Okay, great. So Barney Ross, we know, was a great Jewish prize fighter, great American hero, a very proud Jew, and a very dear friend of my father's. He, together with a fellow by the name of Rubinstein, fought the Nazis in Chicago with their group. Now, I'm trying to remember the fellow's first name, Jack Rubinstein. Does anybody recognize that name? How about Jack Ruby? Okay, yeah. He was a mobster, but he was a proud Jew, and he fought together with Barney Ross and with other Jews and fought anti-Semites in Chicago.
That's right.
So the formation of the mob. The mob comes about as a result of a power struggle amongst the Sicilians. There were two Sicilian bosses. One was known as Joe, the boss Masseria, and the other one was known as Salvatore Maranzano. Now, they were the bosses that originally came from Sicily, from a place called Castellamare. Castellamare was a little place, and you came from there. They had two power bosses at the time, and they fought over power at the time of Prohibition. Now, the Jews, we had our own mob. I'm going to look for name identification right now. How many people here recognize the name Meyer Lansky? Oh, thank God. I got an educated crowd. And how many people here recognize the name Bugsy Siegel? Oh, wonderful. I love talking to educated Jews. Yeah. And then you had Dutch Schultz. Okay, Dutch Schultz. His actual name was Arthur Fleckenheimer. He was a German Jew, son of religious people, but he decided to become Catholic when he died, and we said, okay, go ahead. You can have him. They killed him in Newark, New Jersey in 1935. Maranzano and Masseria fought over the new Turks. The old Italians were called the old mustaches, all right? They came, the old mustaches, Sicily. They had that xenophobic mentality. We don't do business with people that are not from Sicily, not from our village, not from our road, my mother didn't know his mother. And they certainly weren't going to do business with Jews. But there was a very smart guy downtown New York by the name of Charlie Lucky Luciano, all right, Lucania. His real name was Lucania, and he had a brain. And he liked Meyer Lansky because he said, wow, this guy's he's smart and we can make money. And they were introduced together to a fellow by the name of Arnold Rothstein. Well, Rothstein gave sophistication to, taught him how to dress, how to be nice, don't look like be a celebrity gangster. Look good, put on a jacket, tie, so forth and so forth. So the young Turks amongst the Italians was Anastasia, you had Albert Anastasia, you had Vito Genovese. You want to help me? Frank Costello. Come on, people. I see it. I got an educated crowd here. So Joe Adonis, all of that young Turks were part of the Lucky Luciano crowd of that mob, and there was a power struggle between Masseria and between Maranzano that fought over the control of Lucky Luciano. Because if you control Lucky Luciano, you had real power. So they wanted to have him. Joe Masseria kidnapped Lucky Luciano, made him an offer that he did refuse. And they cut him up, left him for dead. He survived. And then he went and talked to Bugsy Siegel, and he talked to Meyer Lansky. And he says, gentlemen, we're going to form a new organization. But first, we got to get rid of the old timers. The Italians, together with Bugsy Siegel, he participated in that. They killed Joe Masseria while he was eating in a good Italian restaurant in Coney Island. Italian restaurant. They made chulin out of him. They made chulin out of him. And the Jews were hired to go kill Maranzano, Salvatore Maranzano. They dressed up as IRS agents and walked in on Salvatore Maranzano. They didn't recognize who they were. They consisted of one of Dutch Schultz's guys. I think it was Teitelbaum. Another fellow, of course, was Bugsy Siegel again. There was another fellow that I think might have been Louis Rush, but for sure the fourth guy was Sam Red Levine. Now, wonderful man, Sam Red Levine. Rabbi would be very proud to have him here in his Chabad. He always had a kippah on his head, wore tzitzis, all right, kept kosher, observed Shabbat, and would never kill anybody on Shabbat unless it was absolutely necessary.
You weren't
Samantha, am I boring you yet? No. Okay. So now you had the formation of the mob. They made a deal with Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel and Lucky Luciano. It was a very, very strong relationship. Now the Jews, we had our own power, so they respected us for it. And they only respect us when we do have our own power. All right?
That's right.
It's a great story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe one time seen somebody on the street. You know the story, Rabbi. And it was a Jew, and he bowed his head, and when he saw a Gentile coming towards him, he tipped his hat. And the Jew says to him, "Oh, Rebbe, why for me you bow my head, and for him you don't bow your head?" He says, "We never bow our head to anybody but ourselves." Wow. Our Jews had the same mentality. It was no longer a question of bowing our heads to anybody. We were now in the process of getting rid of the mentality of galut. It was not only happening here, all right, but it was happening in Europe. We had somebody by the name of Vladimir Zevjavet.
Okay, he said the word galut there. What that means is two ways to understand that. One is the galut is the dispersion, the diaspora. But he also can use it to mean anybody that's not a part of Judaism. That's not a Jew. You can use it in different ways.
Jabotinsky, the great founding father of the revisionist Zionist
Jabotinsky,
which is the philosophy, which is the philosophy of Menachem Begin, Ben-Zion Netanyahu, Shamir, and Netanyahu. It's a philosophy that we are proud. We're absolutely proud, and we're not going to bend our heads and bow our heads anymore, and so forth and so forth. Next, Rabbi. You have anything better than this? So, in the end of the 30s,
thank you very much.
the war started.
That's great.
All right, World War II started, and at that time, their war was declared December 7th, December 8th, 1941. Immediately in February 1942, there was a very well-known incident in the port of New York, in the docks of New York. It was the sinking of the Normandy, the SS Normandy. The SS Normandy was a luxury ship that was brought from France, and we were going to use it to make it a ship for transport, to bring American troops to fight in Europe. And that ship was sunk mysteriously. To this day, nobody really ever knew what was the reason that it sunk, but there was concern. And it brought about a little bit of paranoia on the part of the United States government. There was a Navy intelligence officer by the name of Charles Heffernan. Charles Heffernan was contacted, reached out for an attorney by the name of Moses Polikoff. Moses Polikoff was the attorney for the mob. He was the attorney for Meyer Lansky, for Lucky Luciano. And he reached out for him and he says, could you make a meeting? I want to meet with Meyer Lansky. And Lansky agreed to the meeting and met with Charles Heffenden. He says, what is it that you need? He says, we need protection against sabotage in the ports and docks of New York. You got the German U-boats, you got this, you got that, and so forth and so forth. We need the help of the longshoremen. And we're concerned because the longshoremen consist of two ethnic groups, the Italians, who might possibly be sympathetic towards Mussolini, and you got the Irish who are anti-British. So we need the cooperation of the mob because you guys control the longshoremen and so forth. So Meyer Lansky says, well, okay, but your guy Dewey, all right, Thomas Dewey, who was at that time prosecutor, you framed Lucky Luciano on a nonsensical, fake fraud charge of prostitution. And you want to become the governor. You're against organized crime. You took down Lefty. You took down Abe Rellis. You know the story of Abe Rellis. He was in the hotel Half Moon in Coney Island, and he was going to inform against the mob. And so he was guarded by the police and so forth and so forth. And somehow or another, they found him the next day on the pavement. And so the papers had the next day headlines. The canary can sing, but he can't fly. So Dewey he aspired to be the governor. And so he used the prosecutor's office and taken down Lucky Luciano. He got up with a 30 to 50 year sentence. They shipped him up to a prison called Dannemora, all the way up in New York State on the border with Canada. You freeze your tuchus off there. You don't have to worry about, global warming up there. So Lansky says to Polikoff to tell Heffenden, good, you bring my man down here because the only guy that can control the docks, the only one that they respect is going to be Charlie Lucky Luciano. Bring him down, bring him to a closer prison, and let's also talk about some kind of a pardon because you know damn well that was a fraudulent charge that you brought against him. Okay, so they brought him down to Great Meadows a couple of hours from here, a little bit closer. This way he could get his shrimp marinades. You know what I'm talking about, Rabbi. He could get his ossobuco. He could get his pork chops. So, and
It's a
maybe
little
something
crass.
else at night
It's
as
a little
well.
bit crass.
Listen, if he's going to cooperate with the American government, give the guy something for God's sakes. So, anyways, Lucky Luciano sends the message. There were two dock bosses. One, the Italian, was Sachs Lanza, and he belonged to Lucky. And the other guy was Eddie McGrath, the Irish boss, and he cooperated as well because he was also part of the whole story. Lucky Luciano, for recognition, they went to Dewey at that time and said, could you give him a governor's pardon, a gubernatorial pardon, because he did cooperate. So ultimately, what happened is the mob sent a message to Dewey through Polikoff, we will back you when you run for governor of the state of New York. All right? We will back you. Despite the fact that you took on us, we're still strong enough and you need our support. And sure enough, the mob threw its support behind Dewey. Dewey eventually gave him a gubernatorial pardon with the condition that he had to be exiled from the United States. He went back to Sicily. The two kids that were his bodyguards, I eventually met those kids in 1966 at a place called Fort Lee, New Jersey, in a little Italian restaurant. I met them together with Tommy Ryan Eberly. These two kids were the bodyguards to Lucky Luciano when he was exiled back to Sicily. I did business with those kids, good boys. The third one, he wasn't so good. They found the car, but they never found the body. That was supposed to be funny, people. Anyways, eventually, I brought you to the point now of the struggle for the War of Independence in Palestine. Truman recognized the state of Israel 20 minutes after they declared themselves independent. And it was not an easy decision for him. He was under tremendous pressure from George C. Marshall, who was his Secretary of State, very famous general during World War II, who was the Secretary of State, and told him, no way, you're going to do this, I'm going to resign, and so forth and so forth. Truman, up to that point, he was a Midwest anti-Semite. It was nothing for him to call a guy a kike. In fact, his close friend was Eddie Jacobson, that was his partner in the haberdashery in Lincoln, Missouri, during the time before the time of the Depression. And the Zionists used him to finally reach Truman so that Truman would accept to receive Chaim Weizmann. And Truman apparently was impressed enough with Weizmann to say, yes, I'll do it. However, there was a Neutrality Act that was invoked it passed in 1939, that was invoked in 1947-48, which made it a criminal activity to ship weapons, cash, any support to Palestine for either Jews or to the Arabs. So Ben-Gurion sent a fellow by the name of Zaslani, his trusted confidant. He sends him here to the United States and says, go to the legitimate organizations, get support. And the two legitimate organizations said, no. We're not going to break or violate American law. We're American citizens, blah, blah, blah. Ben-Gurion comes himself. Now, Ben-Gurion was in the Jewish army, in the Jewish unit of the Mule Corps, 1917, in the War of the World War I. And he had a friend. His fellow soldier was a fellow by the name of Resnick, Zalman Resnick. I think it's, anyways. Resnick owned the Palisades Amusement Park in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And Ben-Gurion reached him and said, no, what are we going to do? He said, I need weapons. Your government got this, no problem. Resnick was a real stand-up guy. And he supplied thousands of pistols, independent. There was an introduction made to a fellow by the name of Rudolph Sonnenborn. I don't know how many of you people know the name, but I recommend a book called The Pledge. It was written by a fellow by the name of Slater, 1970, as a tribute to these Jews from all over the United States of America that participated in supplying weapons, cash, and shipping to Palestine to help the cause. The Sonnenborn group would meet once a week. They would meet in the city.
So you had all these Jews that were contributing money, weapons to Israel to fight the war over there, the War of Independence. A lot of that money and that came from the gangsters. Right? So now think about that. You got all these churches out there that say they support Israel and they love Israel, and it was God that fought for them during the War of Independence. What if they knew this information? Do you think that would change their tune? It probably would. They say, oh, well, we didn't know it was gangsters. But that's because they have a wrong view of who the gangsters were.
Industrialists from all over the United States would come, wealthy industrialists. Now you had a lot of surplus weaponry, trucks, jeeps, ammunition, dynamite, and so forth that was being bought up all over by the Zionists, all right? And it was being shipped from different places from Los Angeles, Greenspan, who was connected with the mob in Las Vegas. And then you had shipment out of Mexico. We had shipment out of Nicaragua. We had Anastasio Somoza, who was the dictator of Nicaragua, paying